everyone. I hope you're having a great day. You're listening to TechFest Talks, a podcast by students for students. My name is Jasmine Kieran-Ejimadu, and I am an S5 pupil from Robert Gordon's College. Academically, some of my interests are the human body and the French language. Outside of school, though, I love writing, playing music, and playing my favorite game. From what I've just said, it may be obvious that I'm not very well versed in the ins and outs of the energy industry, which is why I'm delighted to interview today's guest, Victoria Allan, and find out more about it. Hello, Victoria. How are you today?
I'm good, Jasmine. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great as well. Perfect. So I'm going to just delve right into the questions for today. So for my first question, I was hoping that we could just start by you simply introducing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you already said, like my name's Victoria Allan, and I am a mechanical engineer at a company called CNOOC International, which operate out at Kings Wells in Aberdeen. But they're actually a global company that operate globally, primarily in China is where they are originally from. But I've worked there for 4 years now, and I graduated in 2017 with a master's in mechanical and offshore engineering. And before that, I was at CNOOC Academy, which is quite local as well, just a little bit out of the city. So yeah, and then I guess in because you mentioned what you like to do in your spare time as well. I'm a really active STEM ambassador, so I really enjoy speaking to people like yourselves and just encouraging the next generation into the energy industry too. And I've just recently kicked off a program for STEM ambassadors at CNOOC as well. But other than that, I just like doing like the normal typical things like seeing my friends, because now that we're all out of uni, everyone's moved away, so you have to actually like dedicate weekends to see.
Yeah.
And like going to the gym, seeing my like just spending time with my dog, hill walking, holidays when you can and stuff like that. So that's a wee introduction.
You sound like such a fascinating person. That's so interesting to hear. So even moving on from what you just said, in the terms of your career, I'm really fascinated by what that entails and why did your career and your path in the world of work, why did that particularly attract you?
Absolutely. So it sounds like we have quite a few similar interests. I honestly loved, but I'm guessing you do biology at school. Um, I literally loved biology, but I was finding it hard because I loved sciences at school. Like every single science you could do, I was doing, and maths as well. When you're at that age, it's so hard to know what you want to do or even have an
I
idea
agree.
what the next step is, and like the end of school is fast approaching and you're like, oh my gosh, like what's next, like what do I do? And that was something that I think a lot of like me and my friends all struggled with. But I guess zoning in on the subjects that I kind of identified were my favorites, which was definitely maths and physics. um I just started to speak to like careers advisors and looking at various opportunities and speaking to like family and family friends and just seeing what their opinions were. And engineering just kind of seemed to be like a natural next step for maths and physics, just out from my personal experience. So I guess that was kind of what attracted me to it, was like because primarily I just love problem solving. Like that was always something that just when you solve that problem, you can never really like it sounds really nerdy, but like you get like a high out of like when you figure out something and you're like, oh my gosh, like that feel like so like empowered, like yes I did it, like that was such a good moment. So that is basically what every day in my work can be like, because there's a lot of problems that crop up, and it kind of is a constantly evolving uh, environment with various challenges coming up. And being able to apply that problem solving that I've loved from such a young age to my job now is something that's really like rewarding for me. um but my like current role, I've been really lucky in my career so far, is that only being there 4 years as a graduate, I've had literally four different roles, because it's important when you're at such a young stage in your career to get that experience and get that awareness and not box yourself into one role for the rest of your life and think this is all I can do. So I've been very fortunate that CNOC have really supported me in allowing me to explore other options and seeing like what I would maybe want to kind of hone in on for a longer term future career path. So I've had a few different roles that haven't necessarily just been engineering as well. Um, like my first role, that was in the facilities engineering department, and that was basically, that was a lot of problem solving. So it would be like various issues that have maybe come up, like if a pump was too big for what it was required to do now, it was like how you were going to redesign it and get it implemented and make it more efficient. That was a lot of problem solving. And then I moved into the hydrocarbon release prevention focal point role. So that was a huge focus on safety, because obviously our ultimate goal is always absolutely no oil and gas releases at any point. Our environment is such a big part of every day at work. So I'm protecting the people fundamentally as well as the environment. So that's a huge push. So I had like an actual role dedicated to preventing that and how we were going to implement preventing that sort of focus and program to make sure that the focus was always on absolutely zero spills tolerated and zero releases at all. And that involved a lot of training. I got to go to China with that role. It was just really, really interesting. And that was actually when we got to a virtual reality kit rolled out across the company that I got to like basically roll out to everybody and take it to London and in Aberdeen and offshore and everything. So yeah, there's so many different things that I've managed to achieve in a really short space of time. And that's
That's
not meaning to
amazing.
sound big-headed at all. It's just I'm very fortunate with the opportunities I've been given.
It's
Um,
very inspiring that at such a relatively young age that you've been able to accomplish this much.
when I say it out loud, I'm like, oh, that does actually sound like quite a lot. But at the time, it didn't feel like it was that much. So, but thank you very much. That is very kind of you to say, Jasmine.
That's so interesting to hear. I'm so happy to hear about all of your endeavors. And honestly, I feel like with all the things that you've done so far, I feel like our next question, you're perfect to answer this. So I was thinking of asking about what are some of the issues that the energy industry faces today? Because I feel like you know, probably from all of the experience you've had so far, you would know quite a bit about that.
I can certainly have a go at
Yeah.
answering it. I think you're exactly right when you say that. There are a lot of issues that are facing the industry. Um, I think one of the most important ones for me is that as a young engineer coming into the industry, the kind of press that surrounds the industry itself is not positive in any way. I think anyone can look at that and say, anybody else, like any younger person trying to join this industry, there's lots of negative connotations to it. Nobody will realistically see that they want to see that as a long-term career. There's lots of talk about how oil and gas is going to be a thing of the past before we know it. And I mean, that is realistically, it's not going to be a thing of the past before we know it. We know that oil and gas is a finite resource, so initially, like eventually it will end, and that is a known fact that can't be denied. But I think what's important to kind of change the narrative with me being a STEM ambassador, one thing that I'm really passionate about is trying to change the narrative that young people, I'm sure, are reading about, seeing on TikTok or wherever about how negative everything is. But we have like some of the most important health and safety laws literally in the world, and the focus on environment is huge, and I don't think that's potentially shared enough. So I think that being able to be in a position as a STEM ambassador to educate the younger generation and highlight all these great things that we are doing to improve the environment and to make ourselves cleaner as such in the industry and everything is really important to pass on, because there will be no future talent coming in if the kind of narrative continues the way it is. And it's such an exciting potential industry to get involved in. It's going to have decades and decades of it left. And with all of the challenges that are also coming up from the government and from like global leaders, etc., then it's actually a really exciting time to join the industry as well. I mean, as I'm sure you've probably seen in the news and heard at school and outside, like there's obviously like urgent action that needs to be taken on climate change, and that's top of the
Yeah.
social, political, and all business agendas literally everywhere. So, like CNOOC in particular, like we've been really forthcoming about how we're going to tackle net zero and the North Sea transition deal targets, and like how we're going to manage the expectations and in shaping the future of the UK oil and gas industry. Um, so there's huge challenges, but fundamentally as an engineer, that's the sort of thing that you thrive on, because it is ultimately just problem solving
Yes.
again. And how are you going to make things better? How are you going to improve the efficiency? How are you going to manage the people into diversifying their skills and helping build their careers and their personal development as well? Like there's loads of different challenges that are out there. And it could probably fill like 10 podcasts if you wanted, but
You went through every
um,
single one, yeah.
yeah. So I think there's just there is a lot of issues facing the energy industry, but I think as long as we're all like educating each other and learning from each other and learning from the experience of people that have had previously, and like looking at the path of where we need to go. So like I don't know if you've maybe heard of the uh OEUK's roadmap 2035.
I've never heard of that, I don't
No.
think.
So
Yeah.
basically what that is OEUK, they've just gone under a rebrand. They were OGUK previously, but they were so they're Offshore Energies UK now instead of Oil and Gas UK. And I think that name change also just signifies like the significance of the dedication of the industry into making everything into a whole new, like that we acknowledge that the energy industry is changing, and that name change really does reflect that we are looking to diversify into cleaner energy, and but utilizing oil and gas to go alongside that as well. So the roadmap 2035 is basically how we're going to achieve net zero. So net zero is when uh, the UK government set the target of 2050 to have net zero emissions. So that means that some greenhouse gases are still going to be released, but these are offset by removing the equivalent amount from the
I
atmosphere and
see.
storing it. So, like we've got this roadmap 2035, which is basically outlining how the oil and gas industry is planning in the UK North Sea is planning to accomplish that. Um, and it's really interesting about how they're going to achieve it, and it's obviously there's still a lot of unknowns because 2050 sounds like it's a long way away, but I'm sure it'll be here
So
before we
at
know
this
it.
rate, but it's already 2022, I
I
cannot believe
know.
how fast it's
uh,
going.
it's crazy, isn't it? I can't believe we like lost 2 years basically. Like,
Basically, oh, it's going so fast. I'm
it's
not even that old, but I feel old.
well, don't, you're definitely not, so please do not think that you are. um but yeah, it's basically like how we're going to all manage that, the roadmap
Yeah.
2035, and going forward. So it's a very exciting time to definitely join the industry with all these problems to face, but we're going to tackle them head on and come out successful at the other end.
Yeah, I think considering the fact that engineering is full of problem solving and now there are big problems that need to be solved, it's like the best time to join the industry and have a head start and solving all these problems. Thank you for the
Absolutely.
really amazing answer and also for teaching me about net zero because I did not know exactly what that was, though I'd heard about it.
Yes.
But I did note something pretty interesting that you said, which was about offshore. And I believe that you've worked offshore before,
Yes,
which is
that is
why I was thinking about asking about the importance of working offshore and how it differs from you working on land.
absolutely. So I was very lucky. My graduate program at work actually does. One of the things that actually really made me attracted to that job in particular was that we do a secondment offshore, so that it's usually between 12 to 18 months. Unfortunately, COVID had other ideas for my length
Yeah.
of placement,
Oh, it's
but
COVID. Yeah.
yeah, we couldn't avoid it. So, but I think I have been very lucky in that I have spent quite a bit of time offshore. I did a few trips while I was actually working offshore as a member of the core crew, but then I've also done a number of visits as well. So I think some of the main differences is obviously the environment. You are literally working in the middle of the sea. So the first trip that I ever went on, it honestly looked like the Mediterranean. Like, it was blue waters, so calm. It was like a mill pond. It was just so nice. And I
Sign
just,
me up.
yeah, I know, honestly. And it was so sunny as well. It was really, really warm, which, because you have to wear all this like personal protective equipment outside, like hard hat, boots,
Yeah,
coveralls, glasses, etc., it can get really, really warm. So
I can
you're like,
imagine.
oh my gosh.
Oh, I would
And
almost die.
there's literally no way you can get a tan because you're literally covered from head to toe. So,
It's true.
but it can be really, really nice. Obviously, there's days where it's not as nice. Like today, I can imagine it's not that nice. But
Yeah.
the typical working day. So obviously, one massive perk of working offshore is the time off when you're not offshore. So my company, for example, we do a very good rota that you work 2 weeks away, but you get 3 weeks off. So
Ooh,
it's a
that's
pretty good
very
balance.
fair.
Yeah, it's very fair. So that's pretty good. Um, so you obviously get that great time off, but to compensate for that, the days that you actually work offshore are a bit longer. So like you'd be speaking like a typical 9 to 5 here, or 8 till 5, or whatever the working day might be for
I
like
see.
it's that sort of idea. But offshore, it's usually like 12 hours. So like 6 till 6 or 7 till 7. It just depends. Um, but like one of the things that I think is massively overlooked is how valuable the people are offshore. Like these people are literally keeping everything running smoothly, doing maintenance as required, and that is all to make sure that we ultimately, as a company, are delivering the energy demands that we need to deliver to keep everything in the UK, like still contributing to the energy supply of the UK, to make sure that everyone's still got their heating, their electricity, that we've got everything we need for like manufacturing and all of that. And there's such a huge part of that. One of our assets, I think, produced about when it was at its peak production, was producing 10% of the UK's energy demand on its own every day. So
That's
there's
a
a
lot.
huge, it's a lot. Exactly. When you put it into perspective like that, it is a lot. So um yeah, that's why it's so important that we need to make sure that everything's running smoothly, because suddenly if you've lost 10%, then where's it going to come from? So
That's a big
um
problem.
exactly. So I mean, it's a constant cycle. And another massive perk that I personally found is that everyone offshore is lovely. They literally just treat you as one of their own. They like take you in as part of the family. They're so knowledgeable. Like they're literally know the plan inside out, and they know you can like say, oh, like where's this, and they literally can be like, oh, it's on level 2 of this platform in the corner or whatever. Like they just, because they've spent so much time there and they're so experienced, the knowledge that they have is invaluable. So it's a brilliant learning opportunity as a young engineer, because I always say to them, if I could even have a tenth of the knowledge that you have, I would be in a great place. And they always
I
are like,
can
oh, don't
imagine.
say that, but they're just so knowledgeable and know how to fix things at the slightest change, or monitoring trends or whatnot, and they're like, oh, that's changed a little bit, we need to go and adjust this, blah blah blah. It's just fascinating just being there and being in the environment. The food is amazing, by the way. uh,
Ooh.
like next level. Like one of a fun fact is one of our chefs on our Golden Eagle platform actually left to go and become Roger Federer's personal chef. So the food
Whoa.
is good,
That
to
is
put
that
that
is I
mildly.
that's all I needed to hear.
Exactly. So, and then we've got like fillet steak nights. Like they've got different. It's a good place to be for food
I
alone.
can imagine.
So
That sounds so interesting. Honestly, I basically know nothing about going offshore, but hearing about how important it is for supplying the UK's energy and then also the good food, that is
exactly,
amazing to
it's
hear.
a win-win.
Literally. It's so interesting to hear. And um, I also want to reference another thing that you said earlier, which is about um, oil and gas being finite, and how that obviously is meant that the energy industry is in the process of evolving to adapt to that.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, from your experience, if you have come across any types of renewable energy that are promising for helping to solve this problem, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, renewable energy is obviously something that's been around for a long, long time, and it's been implemented at various stages. And I'm sure that, being from Aberdeen as well, you can see wind turbines floating around literally in the
Yeah.
sea and all around us. So, um, that I would say that the kind of most promising ones is like wind and solar, particularly for Scotland initially. I'm sure that that will evolve and change over time, but at the current moment, I would say wind is probably, and this is all just my personal opinion, but I would say
Mhm.
wind is probably the most promising one at this point. I think offshore wind is something that's going to become a much bigger opportunity. And there's been things in the news recently about various wind farms that are going to be going up around Aberdeen and Scotland and the UK, and which is really exciting. I mean, that's just like already highlighting like how many uh, job opportunities that will be created, and the just kind of expanse of what's already existing in that field, and how much that's going to grow. So that's really exciting. Solar energy, that's obviously maybe not as good for the UK because we don't get that much sun,
Mhm.
but
Really depends.
surprisingly, surprisingly, it is actually still very effective because I did a STEM ambassador session with a local class, and they were asking about solar panels, and I did some research into it because that's something that I personally don't deal with every day. But I did some research, and I found out that despite even on overcast days, you can still get a lot of energy from the sun. Which I was like,
Interesting.
oh, yeah, and there's
It's very
various
useful.
types of exactly. So because I have often seen like just driving around and you see various houses with solar panels, and I'm like, how effective is that? But surprisingly, yes, it is. There's also other types of renewable energy, so like hydropower is like from waves, and like or dams or etc. That's also very very effective. It's just maybe not as uh, first choice, I would say, and there'll be a number of reasons why that will be the case. It'll either be like the environment, if it's too difficult to maintain, or if it's not reliable enough, or the costs can be a huge implication as well. Like if it's far too expensive or just not viable, then that's going to be a big no go. But I mean, there's also like geothermal energy to look at, so the heat that's coming from the earth itself. There's a lot of that in New Zealand with like the geysers and things like that, and even biomass as well. So from plants and other just general organic waste, as well. There's loads of opportunities, and I think that's also just really exciting as well, because just because that's kind of the ones that are of the moment now, that's not to say that there's going to be adapting to other ones or like hybrid types or anything like that. So it's really exciting for sure.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how first of all, how many different types of renewable energy are out there, but also the fact that you mentioned how we can move into offshore, wind farming, is that the word for it? I don't know
Yeah,
what's the word for it.
yeah,
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
go with
offshore
that.
wind farming,
We'll
that's
make
it,
it a
yeah.
word.
We'll just make it a word, yeah. And also the fact that it's being offshore and working with oil and gas, but the fact that we're moving into renewable energy as well means that young people that are going into the energy industry will have a variety of skills, not just to do with oil and gas, but with other types of energy. And I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't highlight enough how important transferable skills will be come for people that are working in the energy industry already, as it's like predominantly oil and gas, and then having that ability to just switch and adapt and grow themselves as well into being able to be flexible to join whatever interests them, or managing the change and the development in away from oil and gas into other opportunities as well. So it's really exciting, to have that opportunity in someone's career as well is also very unique, because there's historically a lot of people, not just in Aberdeen, but globally in like oil and gas hubs that have only worked in oil and gas, whereas like our generation is going to be the first to kind of witness the change and the kind of natural progression from oil and gas into a more sustainable and renewable energy source, which is really exciting for anyone thinking of joining it, or just wanting a general challenge as well. It's great.
Yeah, and that perfectly moves on to some of my next questions, which I'm sure you'll be amazing at answering, which is the opportunities that a career in the energy industry offer, and also the skills that young people can develop and gain from it.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great questions, Jasmine. So I think one thing that is like really hard to actually give a definitive answer for, because it's literally, there are so many transferable skills regardless of what interests you. um like, I'm obviously an engineer, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be an engineer. Like, you can be a chemist, a lawyer, a communications specialist, an accountant, someone that works in health and safety, someone that works in the supply chain and is like sourcing materials, etc. Or even down to like at my work, we have a huge focus on corporate social responsibility, and how we are working in partnership with the communities in which we operate in. So whether that's working with local charities, working with STEM initiatives, and making a positive impact where we work. So even when it comes to that, we have people that are dedicated to that exact role. Whether it's HR, it's literally endless. So there's so many opportunities. It could be working offshore. It could be more of a management level. There's also just endless opportunities to travel, especially if you're working for like a global company that do operate worldwide. And the other good thing is that the career itself does come with a lot of good rewards. So you get well rewarded for the work that you do. It can be hard, it can be challenging, but there's lots of different perks that you get and benefits alongside that too, which also helps, because ultimately, like, you need to have job satisfaction, but if you can have that
Yeah,
alongside a good work life balance as well, that's also really important. I think that's something that COVID's really showed us as well, is like how important it is to make time for yourself too, and make sure that like you're happy with your life outside of your work too. And that's something that my work really do. They're very good at encouraging that. I'm really lucky that my work, we get every second Friday off. So we just
well,
make,
that's really nice.
yeah, it's honestly like every second weekend being a long weekend is just the sort of, it honestly just changes your whole perspective on the week, because you only have like one full working week, and then the next week you're like, oh, it's only like a 4-day week this week. And like just something like that is also just, it just changes your whole perspective. So I mean, getting supported in that way is really, really good too. I guess from a skills development that you'd mentioned, it really also depends on what your interests are and what you want to achieve. So um, I think the core ones that will literally never go wrong would be like communication. That is invaluable. That doesn't matter what job you're in, communication is so important. You'll know from school as well how important it is.
Definitely.
And critical thinking, problem solving, and then ultimately teamwork. Because at the end of the day, working in a company such as the one that I work in is teamwork. You're one big team, and you're all driving to achieve the same goal. So teamwork is invaluable as well. A few other ones that are kind of uh, that I can certainly say that I've definitely gained, and I know a lot of my colleagues would say the same. It's like adaptability, because you never know necessarily what's going to come next, especially as an engineer. There could be something breaks down or something needs to get fixed now, and there's only one left in like the whole of the UK or something, and you need to get that one. And it's there's a lot of like changes that can happen quickly, or something suddenly works and you're like, oh well, this scope that's been planned, we don't need to do that right now. um I think project management, one thing that my work really do is like focus everything kind of like as a mini project. So you really do get a lot of experience, like you'll know from school, if you're doing like a project, or if you're doing like an essay or something, like you've got to plan it out, then you write it, and then you
Yeah.
review it and stuff. It's exactly like that, um every single day. So the skills that you're learning now at school will be invaluable going forward in your career, regardless of what industry that's in. Just like little life lessons that you'll be learning at school will take you forward for you, literally decades to come. um I think leadership is another one that you'll definitely develop and gain, especially as you go in a graduate level, because certainly from my experience, they really want the graduates to succeed and become future leaders, and having opportunities to lead things on your own or speak openly in front of a team of experienced people that are much more experienced than you never gets not daunting, but you do it and then suddenly it's like it's a sense of accomplishment as well. And time management, that is a huge one, because there's a lot of things that are time pressured, and that is something that you definitely learn to adapt with. It's something people are naturally very good at, or naturally maybe not so good at. But it's definitely something you develop and learn quickly as well.
I think it's really nice to hear that the energy industry has so many different careers for so many different interests, which means that basically anyone can get into it if they find what they really like. And I also really
Absolutely.
like how there's so many opportunities for continued learning throughout your career, and also a lot of support and um, the promotion of work-life balance. It's all really nice to hear that. And it's really interesting to know that no matter what career you choose to do, and even if you're in the energy industry for a point and then you decide to move into a different industry, all of the skills that you develop are more than perfect for any sort of career you go into.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, Jasmine. That is hitting the nail on the head for sure.
And basically, from all you've told me, I've learned so much today. Honestly, it's so interesting. Yeah,
I'm, I'm really glad I could help. So thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you.
you too. And finally, this is my last question for today, is whether, in just in general, you have any words of advice for listeners who are interested in delving into the energy industry.
Absolutely. My I think to keep it as simple as possible, I would say just go for it. There's great opportunities. I hope that I've maybe highlighted them a little bit in this podcast, but I my personal kind of go to is I always say just like seize every opportunity that you're given, because at the end of the day, you're always going to learn from it. You might not necessarily like it or think that it's been a huge help, but ultimately you're going to have personally grown from that, or identified something you don't want to do, or something that really interests you and sparks a new passion or something. um I think that's something to really just keep in mind. The energy industry is not for everyone, and I completely understand that there is a lot of negative press out there. It doesn't look appealing for everybody, I'm sure. It does have its challenges, and especially being female, that can be quite a challenge. So you do have to be quite resilient if you're going to be working offshore, for example. There you are usually the only female offshore. There might be a couple more, but that is it for now. That is something that is evolving and improving though. But I think if you want a rewarding, diverse, of continuously evolving career that has lots of endless opportunities, one fact that I think is really important to highlight is that part of the OEUK's 2035 roadmap is that one of their things that they are dedicated to doing is supporting 130,000 jobs across the energy spectrum, and they still need to attract 40,000 people, and a quarter of those roles are brand new roles that nobody knows what they're actually going to be yet. But that was a study done by RGU a few years ago, and I think that's really important to highlight, because there's so many options there that we don't even really know what they are yet, and how they're going to look, and what they're going to end up being like or involving, whether it's like tech based roles, or just new types of engineering roles. It's literally limitless at this point. So I think it's a great choice of career, and I'm certainly looking forward to spending my career within the energy industry and helping tackling some of the challenges that are there already. So yeah, I would just say just go for it, and just see what you think. And I'm sure that there'll be lots that you can learn, and it'll be a very rewarding career in the long run.
Yeah, I think for all of our listeners out there today, knowing that there are so many new roles out there that probably no one's ever done, I feel like having the opportunity to do something new, especially if you're unsure about what you want to do, is amazing. And it's really good that the energy industry can offer that. And that was actually the last of my questions for today. So, Victoria, a huge thank you goes out to you for answering my question today. I'm very grateful, and also for just such an interesting and informative interview. I'm taking away so much new information, and I'm sure our listeners are too. And thank you to everyone who's listening today. Make sure to tune in for more episodes from TechFest Talks. And bye for now.